Hey, Lee Francois here. I am not an expert. I just consider myself an independent thought leader when it comes to COVID-related things. This week, we had some big news. The CDC finally acknowledged that natural immunity is more effective than the vaccines. Stuff that I've been talking about for months now. I put together a few video clips just so that you can hear the news for yourself and also hear everything else that's going on in the world. And at the end, you draw your own conclusion.
New information from the CDC today. A new report out just this week says vaccines, get this, were less effective than natural immunity against the Delta variant.
Fox 31 digital data reporter DJ Summers went through that report very closely. And DJ, what did you find out about it?
It's a complicated study with a really simple conclusion. You have better protection against Delta if you were previously infected than if you were vaccinated. A previous infection was 6 times stronger than a vaccine alone during Delta. That's because two things happen. Vaccines got less effective and natural immunity got more effective. Take a look. That vaccine got 4 times less effective alone during the Delta wave as beforehand.
We're going to break down a new CDC report finding for the very first time that having a prior infection offers protection against new variants of COVID-19. Now, this is particularly important because we've heard data from Israel. We've shared that data with you. Going back to August 22nd or 21st, when that study was first published, we broke that down. Here we are a full 6 months later, and our own public health institutions have repeatedly had speculative conversations around, well, we really don't know about the resiliency, the robustness, the protection offered by our own body's immune system. So therefore, even if you've had an infection before, you sort of don't, it doesn't matter. You don't count. You still need to you should get a booster. You should get vaccinated. You should do all these things. And now we have this new finding, this new outcome data with regards to protection against cases and hospitalizations for individuals who are unvaccinated yet have had a prior infection. Now, I think this is quite interesting because, and I think it's actually a little disappointing in terms of the timing because remember, the Delta variant was circulating throughout the world, not just in Israel, right? It wasn't isolated to Israel. Israel published data in over 600,000 subjects, and they started collecting data in February. They ended that data collection period, I think, on the 11th of August, and they published their findings around the 22nd of August. Here we are 6 months later, and we pride ourselves in America for being really sort of first to market. You know, we have some of the top researchers and scientists throughout the world and so forth. And we're just finally acknowledging, after the CDC director, Rochelle Walensky, has admitted that she's getting media training because people are not trusting her communication style, her messaging. You know, trust in our institutions is at an all-time low. We get this report.
President Biden with a stark warning for Americans who choose not to get the COVID-19 vaccine. He says, quote, they will end up paying the price, even as the CDC continues to face backlash over shifting guidelines for all Americans. Watch.
If the unvaccinated get vaccinated, they will protect themselves and other unvaccinated people around them. If they do not, states with low vaccination rates may see those rates go up, may see this progress reversed. Ultimately, those who are not vaccinated will end up paying the price.
I have limited time. Let me just ask you something else. What % of CDC employees are vaccinated?
We're actively encouraging vaccination in all of our employees and doing a lot of education and outreach in order to get our agency fully vaccinated.
And but the percent?
I don't have that for you today.
I'm told that some north of 75% of CDC employees at headquarters are still working remotely. Is that correct?
We are following regulations through HHS and the federal government.
No, that's not my question. I apologize to be rude, but I'm asking a very straightforward question. I've been told that north of 75% of employees at CDC headquarters are working remotely. Is that correct?
Senator, I don't actually know the number off the top of my head.
When you look down the hallway, are there empty desks? Are over 50% of the desks empty?
Senator, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. What I will tell you is that we're working closely within HHS and the administration to follow the governmental rules for return to the workforce.
There was a recent GAO report that shows, and released in the last 2 weeks, that there's been no coordinated response from the federal government to get people back into work. Now, if there's any agency that, since we have teachers in Fulton County are back at work, that the caseload of COVID in Fulton County is about 88. At its peak, it was 606. If what I've been told by someone who, frankly, kind of knows, that people in laboratories are not showing up. I have no clue how laboratory workers who presumably are vaccinated wearing PPE would consider themselves eligible to stay at home. I say this because I just want to echo. We got to lead by example in the federal government. If our public health agencies don't have enough confidence in the immunization and in the PPE to go back to work fighting infectious diseases, there's going to be a lot of undermining of a willingness to further fund public health.
Right, it's time to make life a living hell for anti-vaxxers, and last night CNN's Don Lemon added fuel to the fire by calling unvaccinated Americans idiots who should not be part of polite society. Let's watch.
We have to start doing things for the greater good of society, and not for idiots who think that they can do their own research or that they are above the law and they can break the rules.
Team Rising is here to discuss the mainstream's ongoing divide. Democratic strategist and director of Waxman, Michael Starr Hopkins, and former Nevada State GOP chairwoman and Republican strategist Amy Tarkanian. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Thanks for having us.
So, Michael, what did you make of obviously the vaxxed and boosted and you can still get it. We all know that. It is true that the experts, earlier were saying, get vaccinated so you won't get COVID. We now know that's not true, but the point is to prevent severe disease. So I don't see what the point is of mocking people who get COVID even though they were vaccinated.
Yeah, I mean, look, I got COVID over the holidays, and
yeah,
because
we had some holiday COVID in my family. Yes.
Yeah, and because I was vaccinated and had the booster, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. And I think all Americans should take the opportunity to get the vaccine and get the booster, so that they can be healthy. One of the biggest things we're having a problem with is these variants are going to keep emerging because people don't get vaccinated. So I don't think we should, humiliate people. I don't think we should talk down to people. But we really need to explain how these variants work, why it's so important that they get vaccinated.
So to completely discount that people who've recovered from COVID also need to be vaccinated is completely mind-boggling to me and to the whole principles of immunology.
So let's talk about this a little deeper. I mean, there is some data emerging showing the efficacy of natural immunity, people who've been exposed and what their responses are. What is, from your scientific lens, what is the data showing from, the efficacy of natural immunity? I mean, we understand that from a policy perspective, it doesn't matter at all. Only vaccines are mandated. You got to show your vaccine card. It doesn't matter if you have proof of, positive infection and recovery of COVID. The only thing they're caring about is vaccines, which seems crazy. Based on the data that I've seen, natural immunity is highly effective.
Yeah, and the antibodies are even different, right? Like the antibody from natural immunity codes for the whole virus, whereas the antibody from the mRNA vaccine just codes for just the spike. So you're going to have less protection, correct?
Right. So as you say, when you have a natural infection, first of all, obviously the route of infection is important. Not all viruses infect the same organ. In this case, let's just stick to the respiratory viruses. So what you call resident immune cells, they are different in different organs. So obviously the way they first recognize the invading pathogen is obviously different, right? So if you have like a stomach virus, it's being recognized or the GI or gastrointestinal virus, it's being recognized by immune cells of the gut, which differ from the immune cells of the nasal pathway or the lungs. So in an ideal situation, you have two arms of your immune response, the innate arm and the adaptive arm. So in an ideal situation, your innate arm first kicks in, which is it's going to see if there is previous memory from something that looks similar. So the coronaviruses look similar to the flu viruses. So if you've had flu in the past, it'll say, oh, this looks similar to this. I recognize it. Let's take care of it. So in some ways, if you were healthy and you've had flu, and this is what studies from England have found, that people who've had flu in the past, they were actually quite protected. They didn't have severe symptoms or had really mild symptoms from COVID-2. And that's cross protection. So your immune cells say, I recognize this. It looks a little bit like that. Just get rid of it.
So would that be to say then that if you had natural immunity from the COVID-2 virus we have currently, and then it mutated down the road, you'd be much more likely to be protected from that with your natural immunity than from just the immunity inferred from the
because
mRNA?
like you pointed out, makes our bodies are making antibodies not just to the spike protein, but to the nucleocapsid protein, and in some cases even to the RNA genome itself. So the RNA itself is non-self, right? Because it's not part of you. So we have a surveillance system that says this is foreign, attack it.
Yeah.
And so you have what's very robust, what we call, and also polyclonal antibodies, because and that's the best way to basically triangulate, right? So you want everything. It's not like just to say spike protein is the face. And if all you're doing is recognizing the face, next time all I have to do is to put a mask and you don't know me.
Right.
But if you are trained to recognize not just the face, but my hair, my hands, my shape of my legs, or the sound of my steps, or whatever it is, then it'll take a lot for me to change all of that to protect myself.
I think it's a great way to look at it, a great way to explain it.
And that's why you see mutations only in the spike region, more mutations in the spike region and less mutations in every other region. So the more evolutionary force you're putting on it with, say, for example, with vaccines, the more mutations you see. I've never seen or heard about these viruses mutating so frequently, but they seem to be mutating, every month.
So